will call the meeting to order. Let's talk about the water treatment plant expansion project fund overview.
Thank you, Mayor. So at the March 18th meeting, Council had asked staff to summarize the water treatment plant project and the utility bond spending. So the bond was originally awarded, the project was originally awarded in 2020, and that was approximately $11.5 million, which was 5% under the preliminary budget. As you know, that this bond was used for a few different things other than just water treatment facility expansion. And you also know that there's been a few change orders that have been awarded for the facility that weren't originally planned for. So what I wanted to do is throw this into kind of a chart for you to see what the original plan was and what it ended up being. So let me see. I got my mouse. There. I want to get this all on one page. So the bond proceeds are what the bond proceeds are. So that was just a hair over $12 million for the entire bond. The bond document said that you can use these utility revenue bonds for any sort of utility improvements within the city of Carver. So that kind of left us, thank you very much, allowed us to, use it. The intention was to use it for the water treatment facility. Had we had other improvements that we needed to make, we were allowed to do that. We had some wells in here that we needed to make improvements on, and some raw water mains, as you can see, the JCP work as well. I worked with Aaron Schmidt on this because we paid a lot of different vendors, and I didn't know what kind of pools these kind of fell into, so he helped me with this. As you can see, the well number 5, we budgeted $480,000. We fell right into that. And then well number 6, that must be where the savings you guys were talking about before I started. That's where that savings came from, where a change in plans happened, and that's where we were able to save some money there.
Because we didn't end up doing well number 6, right?
I believe
well number 5 was productive enough?
Yes, I believe you are correct there. So here I laid out all of the funds so that you guys can see where are we at. I also added in the 2 most recent change orders that were approved probably in the last 3-4 months. So the largest one being the future under drain work for filters number 1 and 2. And Magni is currently working on those. Hopefully be finishing up in the next, before people turn their sprinklers on, because that's going to be very important. And then a future filter drain pipe of $34,000. So that brings us right to where the bond will be completely eaten up. Originally, we weren't planning on those few change orders. And then also you can see that we did use some of the funds for 6th Street, and I'll just explain what we did there. When they originally worked on 6th Street last year, they ripped up 6th Street. It was a complete reclamation. They found that there was some soil underneath there and some utility drainage that needed to be done so that the road wouldn't cave in and become really nasty again, basically. And so in order to make it structurally sound, we did use some of the funds to improve the 6th Street utilities over there, so water utilities.
The future under drain work, that's the filter media we've been talking about the last?
No, these are the, it's these silver plates that go in underneath the...
But I believe the reason why we need to work on the drains is because the media's been...
That's correct.
Yes. Okay.
So that's what we've been going over for months.
Right.
Yes.
Call those on different.
That's correct.
Okay.
The media itself will be paid for out of the operating fund. That's approximately $170,000, I believe.
Oh, okay, because it was 5, I remember it being $500,000 for all of that.
Yep.
That makes sense. I got it, thank you.
You're welcome.
So what, I don't, do you have more to complete on this?
No, this was it. I just wanted to show this is where the money went.
So we had a number of change orders that came in. Are we expecting more change orders, or are we solid here?
We're done here.
Okay.
There's nothing more we can do here. If anything additional comes in, it will need to be paid for out of the water operating fund.
Okay.
Unless it's 28,400.
I can almost guarantee that engineering will probably eat that up.
Okay. Okay.
2 more questions?
No.
So for the future work, the underground drain pipe and the under drain work, that's what we know today for drains 1 and 2,
Yes.
right? Not anything, if anything, needs to be done with 3 and 4.
Not that we know of today.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so that's where we would dive into. Probably not
Everything
dive
crossed.
into water.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Let's see, I'm trying to think. Outside of the unknown with 3 and 4, are there any other large expenditures that we see coming?
Nope, I think it was all just checklist items. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, good summary.
Lori, questions?
No.
Understand this? Okay.
Great.
All right. Thank you. I
Absolutely.
appreciate seeing that all in one place. Okay.
This might be quick.
Item number 2.
This one won't
be more
You
time.
just-
Yeah. This one's already there.
Here's what we never say. Okay, item number 3 on our agenda is a sign ordinance discussion continued, Ms. Smith.
If you want to take the whole time, that's great. We have a lot of time is what I'm saying. Alrighty, so the city council at the April 1st work session reviewed our sign code. We had a couple of situations last summer that led to us having a bigger conversation about our sign ordinance, how we enforce it, what we want it to look like, how it can be accessible to business owners, community groups, etc. So at the April 1st work session, we reviewed state statutes, city ordinances, etc. We shared some feedback from business owners and community groups related to the sign code. So we got some really good feedback from some downtown business owners and community groups. The big part of your discussion was related to temporary signs. So we requested some additional information from other cities, which I'll go through, their approaches to temporary signs. The big crux of the April 1st work session was the temporary signage. How do we approach it? What do we do, especially related to community groups? So pancake breakfast versus garage sale or other community events versus more private sign types. So other adjacent communities, we reached out to several. Dave and I also have had a couple conversations, just scratching our heads, trying to find that needle in a haystack of what community has figured this out. Unfortunately, I don't have a grand
It's gonna be
explanation. I know, maybe it will be us. So Victoria, you can see their sign code also prohibits signs in the public right of way, which is what our code does as well. I reached out to their community development director. They don't actively remove signs right now. Their public works staff doesn't have capacity with their workload. So they probably have quite a few signs up in their community throughout the summer. Similar in Chaska, you cannot have signs in the
Can
city.
you go back one? I'm sorry.
Sure.
So, the sandwich board, so the city council grants permission for these temporary signs?
Unless the city council grants permission for a temporary sign.
Okay. In sections, yeah.
So
So they
sandwich
do allow
board,
sandwich board
correct.
signs in the central?
Yep,
business?
so like on the sidewalk, yes.
Okay.
So similar to ours in that same way. Chaska is again similar, no signs within the public right of way besides governmental signs, so things like stop signs, street signs, etc. Special event signs erected by the city of Chaska, so theirs is unique that they call themselves out essentially to be able to have signs there. And then reaching out to Nate, their community development director, they perform sign enforcement on a complaint basis only. So if someone calls and says, there are signs on my corner, can you come and grab them? They'll swing out and get them. Chanhassen is similar again, so signs can be tacked on trees, fences, utility poles, or in the public right of way. The building department picks signs up during inspections, which is similar to how we operate right now. So Nick and Brian are building official and assistant building official will swing around as time allows and pick up signs. Community event signs are typically left. They focus more on commercial signs, which I suspect Dave might have an opinion on, but they are essentially literally picking and choosing which signs stay and which ones go.
So signs, that's prohibited, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And not to throw Chan under the bus, but I feel like based on what we talked about earlier this month, that wouldn't be something you're comfortable with.
Prohibiting them and then just picking and choosing which ones we're okay with?
Yeah.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah. And I don't know, I mean, I don't wanna badmouth Chan either. I don't know what the conversation was like, and so I don't wanna put words in anyone's mouths or anything, but, you know, my guess is, they're an enforcement-based, or a complaint-based enforcement team, and maybe the reason they don't take things down, if they're community event related, is because maybe those aren't the ones that get complained about.
Okay, sure.
I could be wrong about that, but, overall, what we read on the screen here is
Yeah.
not a good practice.
The point I just wanted to make is, in your eyes, I don't see this as being an option for
No.
Halloween mold.
No, and I'm sure their city attorney would say the same thing. He or she knew that. I don't know.
So Waconia is similar in speaking with Lane, their community development director. Signs are removed by public services, the county or state, depending on the location. So obviously they have different jurisdictions over different roads, so depending on who it is. But typically the public services team will pick up signs as well. Some other communities, 4 more, that essentially say the same thing, that you cannot have signs within the public right of way or easement. So it doesn't seem like any city has cracked the code of how you allow some but not others, or how you can have signs there that feels meaningful with a permit. So some other examples, so Jordan, Shakopee, Excelsior, Eden Prairie, similar language in all of their codes that signs are prohibited in the public right of way.
You said meaningful with a permit?
Yeah, so if we wanted to allow signs in the public right of way, if there was a permitting process, or if
Okay.
there was like a special event that someone was having. So if we knew that there was a large event permit pulled, could signs be allowed for X amount of days, etc.
Okay, well, I'm gonna save that to the end.
Sounds good.
Because
have
that's a
one more
line
slide
of
and then we'll
questioning.
start our discussion.
Yep.
So first and foremost, our sign ordinance does require revision. Outside of our discussion on April 1st and April 15th, a lot of our sign code is really specific to the occasional shop version of downtown, which I think is gone for most places. A lot of places operate on a more regular hour basis. So a lot of our sign code needs to be revised just based on that in itself. What we're looking for from council tonight are guiding principles from the council on temporary signage. So this is probably going to be a pretty tough conversation. I don't think any of us are going to walk out of here saying like, yeah, that feels good and that feels right. Because it's unfortunate that we're in a situation where people are trying to have events, get business, etc. And we need to come in and have some rules and pull signs when we don't necessarily always want to, but we need to obviously be fair across the board for all community groups. So there are 3 things we're looking for specifically tonight. Looking for commercial signage versus community event signage in the public right of way. The enforcement strategy, so what you would be looking for with frequency, consistency, allocation of resources. So again, right now our building department goes out and pulls signs. When we are not super busy in the spring and fall, that's pretty easy. But we're starting to get really busy really fast this summer, so I think Nick and Brian are going to be spread pretty thin. And then a discussion about placement of community event signage on city property, so things like parks, on the railings of City Hall, Carver Station, City Hall, etc. So I will kick it off. I know this is going to be a tough conversation, not one that any of us probably want to have on a beautiful April evening, but if you have questions, otherwise we can jump right into number 1 with signage in the right of way.
Are there any questions before we start? Laura? No. Did you have a question?
Well, we'll get to the discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Commercial signage versus community event signage. Sorry, you want us to know what we think about doing with each one?
No, because you can't do one or the
Okay,
other.
that's what I thought.
Say that again?
You can't do one or the other.
No, yeah.
So how are the other, so the other community said for community event signage?
That was the channel.
That channel.
Uses
Okay.
that's the channel that we can't use as an example. So it's all or
Unless,
nothing.
but some of the other ones had things that you could get permitted by the city, right? That was a couple of,
What, like
Well-
if someone,
oh, right, there, signs on, or public rights unless the city council grants permission for a temporary sign. So that, not to exceed, so you can do it, the council just needs to
I don't know.
have an approval process.
And I don't know what their approval process looks like, but if it's if they're basing it on whether they're okay with the event or not, I don't wanna go there. I didn't delve into their ordinance. I don't know if you look closely at like if there's any criteria for how they approve those things, but what I don't wanna create is a situation where, someone comes in for a request and it goes in front of the council and, they wanna have an event, so they wanna have signage in the public right of way, and we say yes. And then another group comes in for maybe something that isn't maybe as popular or there's different feelings about, and we say no, and that's the issue. I don't think we can create criteria that we can legislate around these constitutional parameters. So
I'm gonna come back to that for a second.
Sure.
Because we have event permitting forms that we have to fill out if you have a large event in the city. So something like that could get tacked on with that large permitted event. Because the event then is sanctioned.
traffic control, things like that, but I think what you're talking about is effectively signs that are advertising for the event, and I want to be a little careful how we do that. Now, no one's proposing language. I don't know what Victoria has in their code about when it says city council grants permission for temporary signs, but I don't want to pretend like the idea of that is just okay on its face. I think we'd have to vet it.
But any permit that's already approved by the city is an event that's approved by the city. So I'm having a hard time understanding if we have an approved event, so we know what's happening. We don't approve the event saying we don't like, I don't know, whatever, the cattle parade, but we are okay with,
The motorcycle
trunk or treat,
parade.
yeah, whatever. But if they are within the parameters of the timing, the amount of people, whatever it is, they get the permit, right?
Permit, correct. Yep.
There's
So-
nothing about signage in there.
There can be though. So what I'm saying is if they're allowed to get this permit, which the city then isn't saying we like the event or don't like the event, you get the event permit, can the sign be included in that then so you can promote the event you're having? Because they're large event permits, it's 150 or more, I believe, right?
Yeah, depending on like the boxes you want to check.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, we could think through that a little bit. And that'd probably require some thought to make sure that we're doing it right. But I think what you're proposing is through the approval of a large event permit, authorizing them to put signage on what city, in city right of way, on city property. I mean, because there's also this distinction of, yeah, this is down here, at least on the other side of City Hall, that's public right of way, but we don't have the ability as a city to tell someone they can put a sign there. That's not within the scope of our right of way. So if it's on the sidewalk and it's in front of a privately owned business,
Okay.
one of the elements in our code says the owner also has to be okay with it, because we, as a city, cannot allow people to advertise via signage in public right of way. That's not within the scope of our right of way authority. So there's that element too. So potentially in certain areas, maybe,
Right.
but I want to be a little careful about that.
Like just for an example, you could hang the sign obviously in front of City Hall.
Because that's public city property.
Being technical, a community park would work, in front of the fire station would work. Those are all things that, in front of Lions Park, in front of Church by the River.
As through the large event permit,
Yeah.
I think we could maybe get there. Potentially, yeah.
Okay. So when we're talking about this, so let's say the fire department open house. The fire department can put their sign in the public right away?
I think they typically go on city property, so it's usually at the fire station, depot park, community park.
Near the road.
Yeah, and we can reach out to the fire department and say, kick back 10.
That's not my point. My point is not to kick it back 10 feet.
Right.
My point is just saying for
Maybe
certain
they shouldn't under the code, I don't
cities,
know if they do
yeah.
that or not. But down here they could, because this is in the central business district and
Yeah.
temporary signs are allowed, as long as the property owner's okay with it.
Right.
Um,
I'm not advocating that we have them kick it 10 feet back. I'm just saying that right now, even for events that the city is hosting, we have them there because it makes sense, because
Yeah.
that's where you see them.
Yeah.
So. I'm sure other people have other comments.
Yeah,
We'll just
so-
keep on going. I'll stop, we'll keep on going.
That was kind of the line of questioning I had too. I hadn't considered the large event registration process, just some mechanism for registration or licensure of signs, something that if it's tied to that, it gives it a specific window of time those signs can be there. It keeps us away from the all or nothing, right? So
A little bit.
we're kind of fenced off from that. And it's somewhat self-regulating in that I don't think everybody is going to come to City Hall to pay $150 or $100 registration fee for a big event just to get their opinion posted somewhere. It could be wrong, and after a year change that, but it would seem to regulate itself that way.
Potentially, I mean, we do have the non-commercial substitution clause, but that gets a little, I mean, how can they substitute a non-commercial sign for no event? In other words, there's no event, so how could they say that? But does that achieve what goals are being sought here? Because, I mean, I can just speak from at least from what I understand. How many large event permits have we issued since it's been about a year? Has there been any? Has there been one or two?
One or two.
Trunk or
Like
treat,
even,
I
I
think,
think
was
3.
one. And there haven't been too many. I mean, is this the situation that we're trying to sort of navigate?
Let me ask a question here. How large are the Lions events?
So the Lions events, I know trunk or treat, they pull a permit for that. I don't remember what the other ones,
Easter egg hunt.
the Easter egg hunt of a community. I don't think we've necessarily pulled them for like the pork chop dinners, or we haven't. Over the course of the evening, we have more than 150 people. I don't know that we have 150 in there at one time. So, and maybe they should be pulling one for that, I don't know, but.
Do any of the youth sporting events ever fall into something like that? Is there a scheduled activity around those events that?
They schedule the fields for some of their tournaments, but
Right.
they don't pull a large event, they just schedule them through the fields rather than an event permit.
And I don't know if do they need signs? Are they asking for signs?
Last year, we had the baseball group wanting to put like T-ball tryout signs out.
And was there,
They got pulled from the community park and the association was pissed.
got it.
They got pulled because they asked what
Well,
the
either,
process was.
well, so.
They were told no, they still planted them.
Right,
So,
but
yeah.
even if they planted them without asking and they got pulled, they still would have been
Right,
mad,
yeah,
so.
but I think it's important that.
Yeah, and Chrissy, going back to one of your points, like if the pork chop dinner doesn't pull a large event permit, we would likely need to talk about signage on City Hall, because that would be outside of that permit too.
Right, so the banner that sits on the front that says pork chop dinner inside would now technically be
Or is.
illegal. Yeah,
Yeah.
it would.
It already
So-
is.
But when we look at this too, so let's put this in a little bit larger context. So the city just requested from the Lions Club $40,000.
Wait, that isn't related.
It is
This isn't-
related.
No, this isn't.
Absolutely it is.
No,
So
it is not.
if we-
Christy, I'm uncomfortable with this. This is not a pay for play. This is
not a pay for play,
this
but
is not
I'm
how-
saying, how do
this
you
is the
communicate?
sign
Fine.
ordinance
I
we're
will
talking
say,
about.
Group A, who sometimes donates to the city, how do you think Group A, B, C make money? They have to have some way to advertise to have people come in.
So what I'm getting worried about is this is feeling like this conversation is getting angled towards we're trying to figure out how can we make it so that groups A, B, and C can get their way. And then I think what I hear you saying is we can't do that. We need to talk about all of the groups from D through Z and then beyond, including my favorite, the sign that is still up about hanging Christmas lights. So I think we need to take a broader step back and remember that, unless I'm hearing you wrong, we need to keep in mind this is a conversation about all signage, commercial, event, central business district, and not just,
But this is
Your
for
lines.
future, no, they're not not just for A, B, and C of today. We may
Yes.
have D all the way through of different organizations who raise money as a volunteer organization in our town. And I think we need to honor the fact that we have groups here, and the baseball association, I have nothing to do with that, I don't have any children in baseball. I'm happy to know that that association is working hard, raising money, keeping our community active, and bringing families and community together. So for me, this isn't about the Lions Club. This is about saying, are we going to do something to honor some of these groups who are coming in to make our town a special place? Or are we going to be so restrictive that now no one can do it to the detriment of some of these organizations?
So, but then some of our commercial entities can also say the same thing. What about us? We're doing something.
Are they
we're
pulling
doing
a large
special
event permit?
offering into the city. So you wanna tell any of the retailers, any of the commercial establishments, any of the businesses, restaurants, bars, that they're not as special, doing special things for our communities.
Absolutely not.
And I don't mean it in as mocking a way as that came off, but like, it just, what we're hearing from
Right,
Dave
you can't
is it
show me
has to
get
be,
the
sorry,
contract.
I'm sorry, if you don't mind.
Right.
It has to be a one size fits all, regardless of if they give money to the city or if
Or to
they
the
solve
children.
my craving when I'm hankering for an ice cream.
Are there a couple of examples, because I know there's been a lot of discussion about signs, and what I'm mostly curious about, and I'm not, when I hear the discussions, it leads to the question, what has been either pulled, it sounds like there were maybe some signs pulled in the park based for Little League tryouts or T-ball or something at one point, but what other signs have been pulled, or what organizations have been told no, that we're hoping, some of us may be hoping could be a yes, so that I can figure out more, kind of put my finger on the pulse here about like what we're trying to sort of navigate through, because the one thing that I said last time when we met at the work session in March was that I do think the way the sign code is written today is legally defensible and workable, and it's not a bad ordinance. So I think that, and I think the reason maybe it's in front of the council tonight, but correct me if I'm wrong, is because there have been a number of issues based on that ordinance that we're now trying to maybe work our way through and amend the code to accommodate these things. And is it events where people are told you can't have temporary signs in the public right of way? Or is it the situation like in the parks? Or is it multiple things? And I'm not directing that question to you, but I'm directing it to the whole group. Because I do think if I can better understand what we're trying to accomplish, because I still haven't really figured that out. And forgive me for not figuring it out yet. But
Do you mind if I step in?
No.
So one of the ones that we keep referencing, the Baseball Association, they called City Hall last summer and said, where can I put my temporary signs? I had to say, nowhere. Unless you get permission from the underlying property owner, someone's yard, that's fine. You need to talk to them. You cannot put them on city property, cannot put them in right of way. The conversation then went to the Lions do it. Why do they get to do it? The city does it. Why do you get to do it? And we have that conversation fairly regularly, and it's tough to be the staff person to say, well, it's...
And they wanted to put them in our park where the tryouts were being held.
They wanted to blanket the community.
Oh, they
But
were
they-
advertising for the
They have
fact
them
that
in
people
the
can
community
register.
park, where they play the games, where they have the tryouts, and that got pulled as well.
Correct.
Got it.
But we've also, I think, heard from the realtors who strap their signs to stop signs, and God, I remember there was some dog breeder who brought in what would you call it, bushel of a hay bale and stuck his signs into that, because it might have been off-season, you can
Where
get the
was
signs
that?
in the ground.
Please just tell me where that was.
Throughout the community, there's one off of the entrance to Brent's neighborhood, there was one off of Ironwood, there were a bunch of them.
I never saw it.
And so, so that's extreme, I think we could probably both agree that
Yeah.
ixnaying
Yep.
on
The bales of hay.
but and it was a large sign too, it was bigger than the, 3x2, whatever, so, there have been, I think, examples of when we do go through and do a cleanup, I think you'll occasionally get a call of like, hey, because I think most of us know that those signs are a solid investment for the most part.
A question before we decide whether or not we want to do it. is there any kind of a licensing process that can apply to everybody? So you want a temporary sign for 5 days, you can go to the city, get a license to put your sign up for 5 days. There's a cost to it. Don't know what that cost is. It doesn't have to be prohibitive, but in a way, having a cost weeds out the masses from putting signs up. So we have a process in place. You license your sign for 5 days. There's a sticker on it. You know that after that, the city has the right to take it down. Could we do that, which opens it up for everybody? And I think the hope would be a fee structure also kind of self-polices everybody from wanting to put up a sign. But an organization who wants to spend $100 to put up 3 signs, if that's the cost, then they're able to do it. We don't get to say if we like it or not. Is that, and we can decide if we want to, but legally, can you do that?
Yeah, I mean, we already have a sign permitting process in place for non-temporary signs.
Right,
So
but
I
this
think
would be
that
for temporary.
right now, the way the code is written is that temporary signs are one of the types of signs that are exempt from the permitting requirements, probably just due to the nature of temporary signs, right? People usually decide last minute, I want to put a sign up for the event, and so the city doesn't make them jump through the permitting hoops. But to your point, if you wanted to make that a permit sign, a permitted sign, so long as staff's review of the permit wouldn't have them go through content-based things, like do we like the sign, or not that necessarily, but you know what I mean, is it this or that, then I think we can absolutely get there.
And I get that this is fraught with some problems, right? Because if we're going to allow it, who knows what we're allowing up for 5 days. So I don't know that we would know how that would play out.
Yeah.
We'd have to see it in action for whatever period of time as a test. And then if it doesn't work, we would have to pull that back. But I just wanted to know if we could do it. Do we want to discuss a permitting process for temporary signs?
But, and sorry to jump in, but
Yeah.
before we jump in through that discussion, I think it's important to throw that point out that we talked about before, that might work for city parks and city property.
Yeah.
But it's a little different for property that we don't own, because we cannot permit signs on private property, even if it's in our right of way.
Right, and if
So
you're getting a
there's that one
permit, you're gonna
caveat.
find out what all the rules are.
Yeah, you have to get the
But
owner's
that's not,
consent.
in my mind, that's not gonna solve the issue. For me, it's all of the signs that go up along Jonathan Carver Parkway, along the main thoroughfares, that talk about Christmas lights and puppies and, you know.
Why do you
My issue is,
You're a cat person, we know that. But all of the things, you guys, we can all rattle them off, you know, finish your basement, you know, like, there must be 30 different ones on Jonathan Carver Parkway and the streets that go from it right down.
yeah, my issue is we're basically legalizing it by lack of enforcement, right? Because there's signs currently.
But we're not following that's what bugs me. Is
Yeah,
we're-
exactly.
We
It's trying
kind
to-
of are deciding not to enforce what
Yeah.
we have
So-
right now.
Do we get enhanced enforcement through this process? So there's money coming in, we don't want to profit from this, but that is money then that can go to sign regulation and yanking the ones out that we haven't permitted.
Could we have it as a deposit? If they have a temporary sign, they have a $10 deposit.
But
they
you
use
guys
that.
hear Dave saying that if we essentially charged for signs, that only is city property. That doesn't address
Sure.
the issue of Jonathan Carver Parkway and all of the
But
city
what if it
streets
just
down
went
there.
into then our more event permits, right? So, and then we know it's on the city property because we call out, it could be here, whatever. And if you're having it over there, maybe, you know, Lion or Community Park isn't where you want it. But then that still creates that all of the ones on 11 are out of compliance. But you have a large event permit, and within the confines of that permit, you are allowed to have your signs up for 4 days before the event, and it must be taken down the day after, whatever it looks like. And then that can go along with the event permit, so when community group Z decides to come in and have whatever, they could have access to, you know, when you come in at Depot Park, or when you come down to community, but that now makes the other ones out of compliance because they're not part of the large event permit. They're not part of any other permitting process.
They're not temporary.
I see where you're going. The only thing that makes me nervous is it's still opening up to anything that is a large event. And then it kind of goes back to what we learned about on April 1st is kind of what I would refer to as the belt lane example, where if we're having an event where we're sacrificing puppies and it's a large event, we still have to allow them to put their signs up. So it could be an
What
ickier,
are parameters, I mean,
that's
the
a bad
event.
example.
No, I don't know,
Honestly,
but
they'll-
that could go over many, many things, right,
Yeah.
that not everyone agrees with. So,
Right.
so in our event permits that we have now, are we able to have any control over what event comes into the city, or is it just?
That's the same type of analysis. It's a First
It has to
Amendment
be
thing,
first,
so we can't look at the type of event, but we look at safety and how to regulate it. You know,
And Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but could we look at the sign and say, that's for an event, that one says, I hate puppies, and only do the events if they both come in for a permit?
For signage,
Correct.
well, I'm thinking through that a little. I mean, we probably can, because to me, there's a benefit to the community through the special event permit process to allow people to understand where the event is happening and how to get there. And we don't want people staring at their maps in their cars. We want people to find events if they're gonna take place here. And so to the extent we approve a large event permit, part of the staff review is to look at the details. Where's the event? Are they gonna have to close streets? Are we gonna need any public support or police or anything? And I think what we can add to that too is tell us your plan for signage and where you wanna put signs. And to the extent that the underlying property owner might be okay with that, we will decide if they're in the right of way, if that works. And you can get there that way. Now, I don't know how much thought goes into these events, but I suspect if we told them they need to provide a sign plan to us as part of their application, that we could get there.
I think I like this idea, like this path we're going down, it feels like there's some flexibility to it. But going back to like the baseball group, they would then have to pull a large event permit for their T-ball tryouts, which I don't think is gonna go over super well.
Well, even if they did, that would be, I mean, it would be 4 days ahead, right? When they're trying to get people to register, and that's usually not enough time for those kind of things.
Right.
I think
So that doesn't solve that problem.
their event seems to not fit the category of,
Agreed, but if
Large
that's the route we wanna go, I think we still have some of the same problems.
Is there any carve out for nonprofit?
I don't think so.
First Amendment problems.
no.
Can there be?
No, because, you know, they're trying to get word out for their things, just like any other
Mhm.
person might. And the reason there's no carve out for that is because we have the substitution clause that says if any sign is allowed in any area, you can substitute the message on that sign for some sort of non-commercial message to whatever extent you want. And so the carve out, even if it theoretically existed between nonprofit and for-profit, wouldn't, I don't think, help the city, and I would also be uncomfortable drawing that distinction in the code, given.
I don't hate the direction we're going, but I still am incredibly worried about the what ifs and the maybe less generally accepted public events that could come, and then seeing, you know. So what if I decide to host a great big Green Bay Packers rally on a Sunday this fall? How would you guys
should do what I was
love to see that? You know, would you guys like to see those signs? I'm gonna make big signs. There's gonna be hay bale
You know what, if you-
in front of City Hall, in front of the
Honestly,
fire
if that was the
station.
event that was happening, I might not attend, but
Okay.
great,
What
you
if-
pulled your permit. Sorry, I know you were hoping I was voting against it, but I'm
So
not.
I really thought I found one.
Yeah, it's just hard to like separate it, like I haven't had much input. What if, it was more like, if the purpose of the sign is to communicate date and time and who the host is with the purpose. And if there's a sign, it has to say either the date or dates and the time, would that take away from something that would be more like what I think of as an advertising.
1-800-excavating. So that's compared
Like
to.
if it wasn't true, like this
I don't think we
day,
can
this
tell them
time.
what to put on a sign.
But if it was, if the sign was more to announce date and time, here's your parameters.
Again, that works until somebody wants to put a commercial message on it. You can't tell them no. I mean, that's a content-based
Okay.
regulation. The content being the date and time of your event,
Okay.
right? So it gets so hard, and
Yeah.
I know I feel like I'm just like the one stopping any productive discussion here. But
So do you guys, you're not, no,
I
you
can't
need to
say
help on it. You're no, I don't
you know, I
think
mean,
no.
this is part of the.
So do you have a recommendation?
Because if I'm hearing you right though, because let's say business, whatever, business Charlie, if they put, we're open from 8 to 5, that could
Mhm.
fall under, I mean, that would be.
They can't put that out there now
Yeah.
unless they meet sign code.
I'm
right?
saying if we're talking with Lori's question,
Oh, right.
if you were to put that, I mean, technically then a company could put, we're open 8 to 5 PM and
Yeah.
that goes in at that.
Yeah,
But-
or it could be a business in Chaska saying, we're open in Chaska from
Oh.
10 until 2. And I don't think we would want, we couldn't say no to
To
it,
it.
but.
So I bring it back. At this time, do you have any recommendations?
I mean, something must be broken, but I'm trying to find out what's broken because I like your ordinance right now. I mean, this is, the city's ordinance as written is, from a legal perspective, really, really perfect. I mean, it's what it needs to be if it meets your objectives, but it sounds like the issue is it doesn't meet your objectives. So if you're asking for a recommendation about trying to get to that objective, which is to allow some limited signage in either parks or city right-of-way or other areas for events, the cleanest avenue to get there might be through the large event permitting. But we would probably have to piggyback an amendment to the sign ordinance there too, because we'd wanna call that out specifically and reference whatever section in the large permitting
And part of that, like,
ordinance we're changing.
right now the Lions don't pull one for the pork chop dinner or the pancake breakfast. So the large events would be Steamboat Days, that motorcycle rally,
They don't pull one for Steamboat Days either though.
okay, that motorcycle rally, the Strains of the Earth event that's coming up. So I think it's a good idea, I think it's something to explore, but I don't know if it's getting us to that point unless the Lions and other groups feel comfortable pulling a large event permit to be able to put temporary signs in Depot Park.
I would imagine that actually a large event permit would be okay for that.
Okay.
And considering the number of people, I'm not saying that we put it in there so that they can start pulling one, but because the event's in a building, it hasn't been pulled in the past.
Right, so then would we require a large event permit for a wedding shower with 170 people?
If they don't want their sign taken down.
Yeah, do they not do that now? Do we usually just pull large event for outdoor? Is that really what all it falls into?
It's if it's 150 plus people and it's either on city property or on city right of way or sidewalks or trails. Or if they want to close streets down for any reason. That's it, because if it's 200 people at an event center that has parking for that many people, there's no need to come to City Hall and get a large event. It's more for the public safety of like when they have public resources or parks or closures or.
And that's my question, like, what's the difference between the Lions pork chop dinner and a wedding downstairs? Who needs to pull a large event permit? Do they just pay the reservation fee or do they have to pay the large event permit now too?
If they want
Would,
signs.
would it be,
I think either way, I don't think we can say the Lions need to
Yeah.
pull it,
That makes sense.
you don't have to.
I don't believe we're requiring a large event permit application
Right.
for like the pork chop dinner,
Right.
anything indoors.
And boy, as somebody who was in favor and I think brought up the idea for the large event permit, that was not my intention of permitting our indoor.
Right.
Doesn't spill out
Good.
onto city streets.
Could a reservation just include the permit if they need it?
That's what I was thinking. I mean, if an organization rented our Little League Park and had carte blanche to use our fields, I'm just giving a hypothetical here, for something, to me, part of that would be, yeah, during the event you can put signs up so people know where they're going. But I don't know if that means they can just put signs around the community in places that we want them to, just to, I mean, again, I think the issue is, it sounds like that organization was trying to advertise to get people to register, much like other organizations would advertise for business needs or whatever. And so it's hard to distinguish them from other organizations that want to put signage in your community for the purpose of advertising or for, drumming up interest in that kind of thing.
So then for our reservations for the downstairs, for the ones that don't have the event permit, Bobby and Sue's wedding, they technically can't put Bobby and Sue's wedding inside on the railing either,
Correct. No one should be doing that at this point.
right now, the way it's written now. So, I mean, does it make sense that something gets added into our reservations for our building
Yeah.
The period
reservations?
of
and-
reservation.
What's
Yeah.
already decided, I feel like just as an education piece, it should be
Yeah, and
included, if it's not.
the tricky part with that is that it could say pancake breakfast, or it could say something horrendous.
We hate the city of Carver, but we're still getting married here.
And it just, I think that we would understand, like, oh, it's an event that got a permit, but the 5,000 other people in this community, 6,000 would drive by and say like, oh, that's weird, that's on City Hall.
I get the worst case scenarios, but is it a reasonable compromise?
Can we also not, if we're giving them kind of signage rights, if you will, with a large event permit, you can't tell them that it has to be about their large event, right? Their signage could still say, we hate puppies.
No, I think we could probably make sure it's,
Aligned.
making sure it's aligned to explain to people where the event is and maybe provide directional information and timing information. I mean, I think there's some leeway to do that if it's for the event and it's related just to that permit. I think we can get there now, and I'm not worried that someone's gonna come in, pull a large event permit, have a huge event, and that's gonna be their way to, get around our regulations against having their I hate puppies sign. I mean, those are just, I think, it's unlikely. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but it's highly unlikely that those kinds of things would be concocted behind the scenes, I feel like. But I do think we could tie a large event permit approval to some reasonable temporary signage. Assuming that it is in furtherance of the event, in furtherance of public health safety, to make sure people know where they're going. Yeah, I mean, to me, I do think that we can.
Okay, so why don't you give us some time, we can mull it over collectively, staff group, figure out what that looks like at the permit. I wanna keep working through a couple of these questions, just knowing that.
Oh, you're
There's
not
more
done?
than
There's more?
I don't know if we answered number one.
That one was really helpful. If we tie that to community or the large event permits and we allow it on city property, so not in the right of way, so you could put them at Community Park, Depot Park, Carver Station, City Hall. That's helpful. That's really helpful information. So outside of a large event permit, where someone has a temporary sign with directions to their beautiful event where they're raising good money for us, what frequency consistency would you like to see at the corner of 212 and down in the Carver Parkway, or coming down JCP or 4th Street? How often do you feel like we should be pulling signs from those areas?
Is it structured now?
It's not, no, and frankly, it is when they start to accumulate and when my team has some time, and that is, daily would be fun and great, but Nick and Brian would probably
Is
be displeased.
understanding that it takes a fair amount of time, but because I think, at least initially, I think consistency is gonna be pretty important, and I would think that that needs to happen at least weekly. Understanding that you're getting into the busy time of year for inspections, but can we pull in, no, we're not doing well with recruiting seasonals, but can we have public services help, or, can we broaden the net
We can try.
deputize Eric to pull them.
Do not.
Thanks.
Oh,
Do not.
you
Deputize.
just you guys ride together. You can look for weeds and you can look for signs.
I'll just park the new loader.
Wow.
You
I
won't see
just-
'em.
That really makes you uncomfortable.
It does, because if you pull up not in a City of Carver car or wearing City of Carver stuff, you just look like a
Like a jerk.
or a jerk.
Can you accommodate that?
But
once a
very
week?
seriously,
Yeah.
it's once a week.
My team, no. If we could include some other groups, maybe.
Does anybody feel differently?
Okay, so when we're talking about, okay, so we have, to be a lot, so the ones that we have down here for the occasional shop. And then we have some other where it was when they could have them Thursday through Sunday,
We wanna
remind me.
We want to get rid of that section of the ordinance. We need to clean that up because the shops don't operate that way anymore, with so many of them being open
Okay.
5 to 7 days a week.
We had talked about maybe doing it like during, from till 10 o'clock at night or something. You have to take they're temporary in nature, and the reason they are is because you have to take them in every night
Okay, that's
rather
right,
than
yep.
this whole Sunday to
Yeah.
Wednesday or Wednesday to Sunday
Sure.
thing.
Okay.
That didn't make
I
much
like
sense.
that.
Okay, so I do have a question then, and I'm gonna use the real life scenario, so the Art Wander, now that's communities all over Carver County, and I believe it's one weekend every year or every, okay. And so we've had signs, as most communities do, for the Art Wander. So technically, this would be, because they don't pull an event permit here because it's not done that way. So those signs then would be gone now, even though, I mean, do we know what other, I mean, are other communities just turning a blind eye? I don't like having ordinances that we just put on the books to turn blind eyes to either,
I'd
so
say yes.
that's what's happening, okay. Because one of the complaints and discussion points and some feedback that we had was about that, I'm assuming. And talking about how we have people coming from community to community to go for this Art Wander, and then they get in this, now it would be in the city limits of Carver and nothing.
Yeah.
So,
And that one was tricky. It was just really unlucky timing when it all happened. That signs went up, the Art Wander was happening, my team went and did a sweep. The Art Wander started the next day, unfortunately.
but then technically the team shouldn't have grabbed those at that time, right? Because if it was what our ordinance says now is they could have, it was within a couple days before the event. So our ordinance says now they could have stayed out. I'm not faulting it.
But to be
Yeah.
clear, like, those weren't the only signs that were picked
Yeah.
up. They picked up
Totally.
dozens
I'm not
of
faulting your
signs.
team, they saw some signs, they grabbed them.
Right.
But I think right now what our ordinance talks about is that you could have it so many days
Only in the
around
central.
that.
Correct.
Because there were some down here that got picked up too.
Yeah.
Again, this isn't blaming fault, this is just
Yeah, yeah.
saying they got picked up, so, I mean, we're not, I get what you're saying, like, we don't even know when we're supposed to pick them up, right, when we're not, so. But now what happens with events like that?
Right.
That are countywide? And now Carver doesn't advertise those either.
But I think, like, that's the same thing. We'll get also pushback from our business community of why can't I advertise my
Big sale.
bake sale, my dog washing business, my whatever, my Christmas light hanging business in April.
I think too, we're not saying you can't advertise, there's other ways, like Facebook or, the social media, it's like, we're not saying no, like, I think it's fortunate that there's other ways now also.
So will we just continue to be able to have the sandwich board signs out here? Is the direction we've gone so far that will still?
It will require revising the code, but yes, that would be the intent.
Okay.
With permission of the underlying property owner.
And that's what I was gonna say, I think the next tricky thing is that permission of the underlying property owner, which I think absolutely has to stay in the ordinance.
Right.
Despite knowing that that's also a pain point, depending on relationships with your neighbors.
But that's us, or we call it.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
for sure, yeah, we can't police everything.
Well, I mean, really, that would be like, we'll take this side of the street out, that would be like Lisa's place, going and putting their sandwich board right in front of the doghouse, it seems
Yeah.
strange.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, even though these neighbors on this side are right next to each other, I mean, if you have to think about that part of it as a whole.
So no one's for, like, we just said, you can have temporary sign, but for 5 days, and then, right, I mean, that's what the option is.
That would be such
Okay, yeah,
a challenge to figure
exactly,
out.
okay,
Could be day 3 or 4 before the city finds out about it, and then it'd be day 5 before we decide if we can even take it down, and then it's like, well.
Okay,
Unless you'd like to come and work.
No,
with
no,
us
no,
and
I-
jobs specifically.
Yeah.
wait,
I can
recommend
it.
As long as he has a city car.
Can borrow your
okay.
car.
Did we give you an answer for, are we on the same page for enforcement? Weekly if we can do it?
Under, going forward, or like right now, are we talking about right now and
These are
going-
for the guiding principles.
Right, because I'm just saying, because right now we have it in there that they can be out so many days.
I think she's only talking about pulling
Yeah.
illegal signs.
Illegal
So
signs.
nothing
Illegal
legal.
signs.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm fine with a week, if that's tenable, I mean,
Yeah.
if it's not, what do we need? We need to hire some summer help that's not applying.
How about Tuesdays every week, so if someone had their more temporary over the weekend, they're gone, give them.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I mean, do you need a day of the week, what are you looking for, just?
A day of the week would probably make it harder, just
Okay.
because inspections are always gonna be their priority.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Just to be clear too, we're only talking about right of way really, because I think we only have the ability to control our right of way. We can't necessarily go on private property that's not subject to right of way and pull an illegal sign. We'd have to send them a letter and say, hey, you have an illegal sign, take it down. I would, and staff doesn't ever go onto private property that we don't control and pull illegal signs without jumping through a little bit more of a bureaucratic hoop, but, I don't know if there's specific locations. It sounds like there's a couple specific
Yeah,
locations
there are some
where it's a
hotspots
problem.
that they always pop up.
But I think we do need to remember that that corner by Shasta is not our property, so they should not be picking up signs there, because that's not actually ours.
Yeah, and that's the tricky thing, is if you would like clean sweeps weekly, if it's just city right of way, we won't hit JCP. That's not technically our right of way, it's the county's. So, it's another gray area. Do you want us to hit that corner? If yes, we'll hit JCP too. If no, we shouldn't pull JCP either.
Does the
Well,
county agree?
JCP is within Carver proper, that is, the corner is
Yeah.
not within Carver city limits, period. I'd rather see them just come off if they're in city limits, if you're gonna pull them in city limits. And that corner's not.
Does that corner feel important to you for some reason? Like, I feel like that one gets really cluttered.
It does, and if we wanna be technical with things,
Is it
that's
even
not our
something that
property.
we brought it to Chaska's attention? Just
But-
kinda came up with the collaboration?
Doesn't Chaska pull
Basically.
when they get a complaint basis, so who's to say that?
Then we come, so do we?
I don't have any complaints about it, and it's the city of Chaska, so I don't.
I think the
Needs
tricky
help.
part for me is once I turn that corner, I know it's not the city of Carver, but to me, you're entering the city of Carver. Like,
But
it
it's
feels
not,
like-
so
Yeah.
for me, it is not the city of Carver, so we should
The
not be pulling them.
aesthetics, not everyone knows that.
Okay,
Yeah.
doesn't belong to us. I don't know, do we drive down in downtown city of Chaska and pull signs out of their downtown? We sure don't. So, my opinion is that that is not within the city limits of Carver, it's not our jurisdiction.
Yeah, I think I'm right with Christie on that one, right, but JCP's in. Doesn't, the county obviously prohibits signs in public right of way as well, right?
Yes, but the county will never come out.
No, don't do it, so.
I think for the county road, or the one road we have eventually, that we just enforce it. And then I think with the little carve out for Chaska, I think just if we just communicate with them. Just say,
I don't-
you know.
What were you talking about with the
The
first
one
one?
Christie was talking about, right, the corner?
No, so like,
Oh, Carver.
once the turn back, like we only have JCP.
As a county road, correct?
Yeah, so that we would enforce on the once a week, depending on workload, you know. And then as far as the aesthetics, if not everyone knows where that property city border is, I think if we just communicate with Chaska and just say, hey,
I don't think there's a reason to draw a line between what you're saying. For me, it's not exclusively JCP, it's Ironwood, it's Spring Creek Drive,
Mhm.
it is like
Yes.
throughout, it's
They're all
Birchie
right.
and High Street, you
Yeah.
know, like it's throughout.
But we're treating it different in that we're gonna, you know, on rotation, if it's once a week, we'll go do it, but yet, if we see something that's technically Chaska, we weren't gonna pull it. But we're not gonna
So
walk
I'm
out of
just
the
talking
city
about
vehicle.
throughout Carver. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter where the sign is.
In the city limits of Carver.
Okay.
Pulled.
Do you have what you need on two, once a week, if you can do it?
Placement of community event signage on city property.
I think that's gonna go with a large event permitting piece of it. So weekly, it is going to look different. We are going to be pulling signs more frequently. You might get more feedback. So good, bad, other.
I don't know, did we really ask you, like, is that too frequent for your workload? I mean, is 2 weeks better? I mean, if we're gonna get calls, we're gonna get calls, but
Yeah.
that's not what I'm saying, I was thinking about that, and like, that's frequent, not that I want them to stay out longer, but that's frequent, does that
Yeah.
actually work for you guys?
For my team, no, but if we can enlist public services and get a team of 4 that rotate, that every month, one person does it 1 week, I think that's more manageable. Just left to my department in the busy summer months, it won't work weekly.
Sure.
Anecdotally, sorry, but like it feels like once you guys do a clean sweep, it takes a while for them to reappear. So maybe it isn't necessarily needed weekly,
Mhm.
but we say it's gonna happen weekly because the first week you don't see a lot reappearing. Week 2, there might not be a ton, but weeks 3 and maybe 4, you'd see more.
Okay.
Was it as bad as you thought?
No, I thought that was, this felt like more of a work session than some of our previous meetings had, so I thought it was great.
That's good. So, I feel like we just kind of did high level. We are gonna get into the weeds and do central business district and get a little bit more specific and go through like everything that you
Yeah.
went through.
I think that might be better suited at planning commission because it's part of the zoning code, so they'll have to have some feedback about it as well.
Okay. And that's why we came up with these guiding principles so that
Correct.
they can.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Any other comments, thoughts, questions? Because we can
Lord, no.
talk about this for another 17 minutes if you guys want it. Okay, let's see. Did Brent get anything for city manager's report? No. Council requests. The only thing that I wanted to draw attention to was on April 5th, Brent sent us an email with a report from a local agency that's facing some pretty serious allegations. It was on the back page of the Chaska Herald. For me, reading it gave some really good insight as to why Brent has been like, no, I would prefer not to send 3 of you to the LMC conference.
Yeah.
Hey, or like, even if we're chit-chatting after a meeting and it starts to kind of turn into business and Brent goes, hey, Reed, you gotta go, or, like whomever it is.
I've politely done it before too, because it's so easy.
Yeah.
To start talking about things you don't even think
Yeah.
about. I mean, it's just you know city
Yep.
business and you're all have that in common. So
And we've just gotten off of a meeting, so it's,
it happens in every community. But those general reminders are
Yeah.
not intended to slap you on the wrist. It's just a,
Yep.
Good.
remember this.
I was
That's
gonna
all.
say, if you haven't read it, read it. For me, the biggest takeaway is it's not the electeds and appointeds names that are redacted in these kinds of things. It's the staffs. So like, it's really, really public, and rightfully so. But like, if when we mess up, and if when we need to do an investigation like this, they will know.
Yeah.
That Courtney talked to Christy, who talked to Lori, who talked to, just not a good look. I like to watch other council meetings, learn from other communities, mostly about what not to do without throwing this organization under the bus. This is just I think it should be required reading for all of us. So,
Yeah, it was interesting.
that's all I got. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Motion by Councilmember Welsh,
I'll second.
second by Councilmember Mock. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.